practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, welcome to the Valuations Podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the premier business intelligence platform for the wealth management industry. My name is Mike Langford, and I will be your host, and this is episode 2, and it's a very special episode because joining me today is none other than Carla McCabe, the Director of Practice Management at Truelytics. And so for many of you listening, Carla is the voice you interact with most at Truelytics because she is the one who's helping you get started and get the most out of Truelytics in your business. Little known fact about Carla, by the way, she has an absolute treasure trove of knowledge, both about the wealth management industry and what you need to do to improve the valuation and the success of your business. But she also is the longest tenured employee at Truelytics. That's right. She goes way back to the early days of Gladstone. So she also has a treasure trove of everything that there is to know about Truelytics. So she knows her stuff. So strap in, buckle up, grab a beverage if you need to, get ready because this is going to be a great podcast. You don't want to miss it.
Hey, Carla, glad to have you. I guess I should say first, what up, OG? Like, you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, I noticed you are the OG of the Truelytics team. And OG in this case, instead of being original gangster, you are the original Gladstone legacy team member. So talk to me about that journey. I didn't even realize you went back that far with the company until I went onto the IMDb, as I call it for the business world, LinkedIn, and kind of went through your history. So how did you arrive at Gladstone, the precursor to Truelytics, and what's the experience been like before the acquisition, the rebranding, and the solution pivot to what became Truelytics?
Yeah, Mike. So it's actually a really funny story. I joined Gladstone about 10 and a half years ago. Prior to, entering the financial services industry, I was actually working in the actuarial field. I unfortunately got laid off due to the consolidation that was going on in the health industry. So I ended up at Gladstone. It was purely by chance. It was the craziest story. I was working with a placement agency and interviewed to be the assistant to the president at Gladstone's sister firm. During the interview process, they somehow determined I was going to be a better fit for Gladstone. So I was hired to be Paul Lally's, who's the former president of Gladstone, his assistant. Craziest turn of luck and circumstances. And it was always jokingly referred to, that I got the bait and switch. So, right. So I joined Gladstone 10 and a half years ago, like I said, as an administrative assistant. Just my natural personality. I'm pretty curious and I'm always, thirsty and hungry for knowledge. So I worked really, really hard and I learned the industry. When I left Gladstone a year and a half ago, I was a managing director running the corporate planning team.
Wow. Well, that's quite the journey. That's awesome.
It's like a Cinderella story.
Right.
So Gladstone Analytics, as the software was referred to previously, was really only a direct to advisor solution at the time. It certainly wasn't our core business, being an investment banking firm. And many people don't know this. We actually created the software kind of by accident. We built it in-house to be a solution for ourselves when working with our investment banking clients to kind of take a first look at valuation and a great way to collect their data. We realized we had a SaaS product. We rolled it out to the industry. Unfortunately, we didn't really have the time or the resources or the experience, et cetera, to, continually be investing and progressing the software like Truelytics is able to because it's their dedicated product.
Wow, so that is a great story. I love that. It is really interesting. You think about all the people you've met over the course of your career and how their career has transformed over time. And what is that stat? They say something like, most people, I'm not sure if I actually have any stats, so I shouldn't say stat, but most people are doing something completely different from what they, went to school for within 5 years after graduating. It sounds like, you can apply the same thing to your career. Like once you join a firm, you might find yourself doing something completely different than the reason why you joined the company. That kind of leads me to what you do today. You are the director of practice management for for Truelytics. That's your official title. And so for those who are a little unaware of what practice management is, or what a director of practice management would do, can you kind of give us a little bit of an overview of like, what does that do? What is that all about?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of the unofficial product expert of the software, having been with it since its inception, which, believe it or not, was almost 10 years ago. So my primary responsibility now is really to assist all of our users, make sure that they're entering their data correctly, helping them understand the output that our reports provide. So being a practice management professional, it's really about understanding the valuation and how it acts as a health metric for your business. The Truelytics platform kind of sort of functions as almost a physical for your firm, similar to how you would go to the doctor for an annual exam. So it's working with our clients, helping them understand what data they should be putting in, helping them then utilize that information as that health metric. What is the health of my firm? Where are my deficiencies? What do I need to work on to make it better? Very few people really get a valuation just for the sake of having a valuation. There's usually another underlying driver or pain point that's kind of motivating that inquiry, whether it's an M&A function, a desire to increase profitability, maybe some sort of corporate planning like succession planning. So my job really is to help you or help our users read the results from their quote unquote physical and objectively analyze, decipher those results as they pertain to each particular situation. And then hopefully I get to work with our clients to help them create a plan to actually get them to that desired objective that kind of brought them to us in the first place.
I like that. I like that analogy of the physical. And it's funny. I never heard anybody put it that way before, but it's 100% true. I mean, you typically don't go to the doctor unless you have an issue. Most people, not you, but very, very few people go to the doctor regularly just to make sure everything's running smoothly. It's when there's a bit of hey, this doesn't feel right, they go check it out. But I talked to Terry Mullen last week on the show, and he has this thing where he's trying to get people to stop thinking of their it as a practice and start thinking of it as a business. And to me, one of the big differences in that way of thinking is, if you have a business, you are regularly looking at, whether it's monthly or quarterly reporting, you're looking at what's working, what's not working. You have a good idea of your sales pipeline. You have a understanding of like where you're profitable, where you're not profitable, how you're investing in marketing and those types of things. So it's real. I love the notion that, what you're thinking, what you're bringing to the table with your practice management focus is not only helping people read that checkup, but understand like, hey, this is an ongoing thing for your business.
Yeah, I even take it one step further, say that you're maybe thinking about going out and doing acquisitions. It's not that dissimilar from saying, hey, I'm going to start training to be on, what's that show, American Ninja Warrior or something like that, where you would go to your physician first, make sure you're healthy. You work with a trainer to devise an exercise program to get into shape. It's really the same concept. And I think when we're able to frame it that way, it really helps advisors and our users kind of connect a little bit better.
That's smart. That's true. Are you going on American Ninja Warrior, by the way? Am I going to see you on there?
Yeah, there's no way.
That would be awesome, by the way. I would totally be in the crowd cheering you on. That would be fantastic to watch. And the worst is I would be like the worst, fan cheering you on, because there'd be a little part of me that would be hoping for a slip and fall in the water, because that's hilarious, right?
I can guarantee you, if I were doing it, it would be inevitable.
That's fantastic. So, one thing when we started thinking about practice management here and prepping for this show, one thing that popped into my head was the difference between your role at Truelytics as an external practice management expert and internally at a lot of broker dealers do offer a practice management kind of internal consulting. It's a little more structured at wirehouses and so forth, but can you do a little bit of a compare and contrast to like what it is that you bring to the advisor or even to the organization versus their own internal practice management professionals? Because I do think I've heard some of this feedback sometimes where like, especially at independent broker dealers, it's not uncommon for them to feel like, well, we've got this, right? We have a practice management person. We don't need any outside help. But what is it that you bring that's either supplemental or just dramatically different?
I think the beauty of my position in the industry with Truelytics is that I'm entirely objective and neutral, kind of like Switzerland. I don't have any underlying objectives other than to make advisors and their businesses better and solve for the challenges that they're facing. And because I work with advisors of all sizes across all channels of the industry, whether that's broker dealer or custodial, registered rep or RIA, I'm able to be completely unbiased. Again, my goal is to help advisors understand and improve their practices, or help that internal practice management professional understand the practices that are within their network, in tandem with, of course, educating them about their options. I've seen so many different and even sometimes really crazy situations over my 10 years in the industry. I think sometimes I'm able to bring a unique perspective to finding a solution for a particular challenge that someone might be facing.
That's a great, I love that, not only the unbiased, but the fact that you've seen so much across a variety of different situations, whereas, maybe an internal practice management professional, they've got a little bit of a blinders on just by definition, right? They only see the advisors in their broker dealer realm, whereas you're seeing advisors across the entire spectrum of the industry, and you're getting a different feel for what works and what doesn't work, and where some of the commonalities and the problems are.
And it's kind of really neat too, because I do often get to work with those internal practice management teams. Obviously, they know their platforms better than anyone. So we're able to kind of brainstorm and collaborate together to find, again, those kind of unique solutions.
That's great. So let's talk about the individual advisors. What are you seeing as you've been doing this? So as you said, you've been with this firm for 10 years now at Truelytics, and your role has changed and evolved over time as the company's changing and evolved. But what are some of the individual advisors wrestling with, some common challenges you're seeing as it relates to, whether it's valuation or succession planning or any other aspect of the business that you're seeing?
I think what it really boils down to is education. Firstly, understanding really the importance of valuations. Most people, when they hear about what we do, they immediately say, oh, well, I don't need a valuation because I'm not selling. And obviously, I hope that most people realize by now that, again, that valuation goes well beyond just putting a dollar figure on your business. It's helping you understand what all of the underlying drivers are, financial, non-financial, sometimes even intangible, that really impact, again, the health of your business. So it's really educating around that and kind of getting them to see, hey, I need a valuation for other reasons than just for selling.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and secondly, around succession planning, it's such an emotional issue. Obviously, everybody kind of puts it off thinking, hey, it's not going to happen to me. I think the statistics are approximately 80% of this industry is lacking a succession plan. And I'm kind of lumping together in there your interim for death and disability, as well as your long-term exit or retirement strategy. Or I often hear, hey, I'm going to die with my boots on. But it's not, the entire thing, not only is it emotional, but advisors don't know even where to begin to start tackling this, what seems like a really huge, overwhelming corporate initiative, which it can be. So that's kind of my passion, is working with them and taking them through the process and helping them understand it and educating them around their options and what they can do about it.
Okay. All right. It's interesting. I was talking to a client not too long ago, and he mentioned he specifically merged his business with another firm and to make a larger firm because of the succession planning process, right? He took a look and he said, he was a 2-person shop at the time. And he said, look, if I get hit by a bus, what happens to my clients, right? What happens to them? What happens to my business? What happens to my family? And so he very specifically, for those reasons, said, I've got to do something. And so they went and look to merge the business and grow the business so that they would have, the structure in place for that very reason. So talk to me a little bit about the onboarding process. You and I were chatting the other day, and you mentioned that you're currently investing a great deal of your time, and you've got this relatively new role of director of practice management, but you're saying a lot of your time is being invested in the onboarding process with advisors. What does that involve, and what are you learning along the way with those people?
Yeah, I do spend most of my days talking with advisors, probably 90% of my time and upward. And I love it. I'm not complaining. It's, making sure again that they're properly entering their data into the system and helping them understand and interpret those results. I always joke that sometimes valuation can really be more of an art than a science. So it's working with our users to kind of tweak their data entry as it applies to each of their own unique situations. I think what's really cool about our software is that it allows you to look at your business through the eyes of a prospective buyer. So it's really about working with advisors to help them view their businesses as objectively as I would look at them, take the emotion out of it, particularly when it comes to understanding the financial and expense aspects of it all. And that aha moment that advisors have when they kind of get it, I love that. We often see advisors that are kind of stuck working in their business rather than working on it, which, Mike, is really a critical strategy exercise that any business owner should be going through regularly. And when I can help them understand their business as a CEO and show them how the day-to-day decisions they make are impacting their long-term transferable value, it's kind of dorky, but that's really what makes me love my job and love working with these advisors.
Dorky can be fun. That's good. That's really cool. I love it. It's really interesting. You can hear it, and I can tell whoever's listening to the podcast that this is not an act, right? You actually do have like a really vibrant passion for this, and it just comes through anytime you start talking about the work you're doing with the advisors. It's great. It's like a true calling type of fit for you.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's funny, and it also comes through in your writing. You've written a lot of posts on the Truelytics blog, and so anybody who goes to blog.truelytics.com will see a whole bunch of blog posts there written by a variety of authors at the company. And if you click on one by you'll see all of your pieces. One of the things that really jumped out to me was one of the posts you wrote not too long ago about how OSJs are often surprised when they go through the valuation process with you or on their own, and they find out it's not quite as valuable as they hoped it would be or imagined it should be. Can you expand a little bit on that kind of logic of why their practice? I guess we'll use it first, practice, why that might not be as valuable as they hoped it would be.
Oh, this is such a touchy subject. So many people hate hearing this. And what it really boils down to is that, an OSJ, it's a group of advisors that have come together to kind of pool resources. There's a branch office that's kind of acting as the supervisory, the regulatory arm for registered reps. The challenge or the problem is that when you get an organization like that, the OSJ doesn't actually own the underlying assets. Those are still owned by each of those individual advisors or teams who can leave at any time. And because the OSJ doesn't own those assets, they're not going to get the same multiple on the valuation. In reality, you can look at an OSJ and say, hey, I can value your revenue, which is basically your override from your affiliated advisors, at maybe 1 times best. Obviously, that's a huge difference from how we look at individual businesses or even an RIA. So like I said, it's a conversation that I don't particularly like having with people that run OSJs. But there is good news. There is a way that you can kind of fix that. And while that model is, kind of necessary for smaller advisors, there's certainly a need for it. That's not going to go away. I think especially as the industry continues to evolve, I think broker-dealer home offices are, trying to shed some of that responsibility from a direct home office supervisory situation. But the OSJ model in and of itself, I think, really needs to kind of shift away from kind of a co-op solution, which, if you think about it, and if we're honest with ourselves, that's kind of how they're functioning for the most part, most of the traditional ones. But it needs to shift to something that can create more transferable enterprise value. I do see a few OSJs out there that are starting to implement this concept, and they do that by using a dedicated management team, really adding those true value-added components that really entice an advisor to stay. Some are even using like a succession backstop program so that OSJ can eventually acquire assets, thereby creating value for the OSJ.
That's great. It's interesting. You and I were, I think, chatting offline about this concept as well, is that I think it may even go further up the chain, right? Whereas we see broker dealers, because they suffer in many of the same ways that the OSJ does, right? In that the independents, the registered reps, they have the ability to leave at any point in time too. So that actually impacts the broker dealer's valuation itself, because, hey, if any of your advisors can decide tomorrow to wake up and go someplace, and really there's nothing you can do about it, or if any of your individual advisors happens to get hit by the proverbial bus, and suddenly all the assets and client relationships are at risk, that's a real challenge for the value of your business. So what can you do to improve that? And I think probably a lot of the things you're talking about at the OSJ level will probably start to filter up. Do you think similarly, or?
You're absolutely correct. If you look at the end user, so the clients of the advisor, so the advisor and their clients, they have this relationship. It's a relationship-driven industry. And I think that we kind of need to replicate that at the OSJ or the broker-dealer level too, is, you're ultimately serving the end user clients. The OSJ ultimately needs to serve the advisors that are affiliated and really build those relationships. And I think that is probably going to be what's key, because technology is kind of evolving for everybody. They have different things, but they're all kind of level set amongst each other. Custodians pretty much offer the same things. Broker dealers offer the same things. Payouts are pretty standard across the board. So it's really going to be those extra things that are strengthening those relationships across all levels of the industry, from home office to ultimate, client at the very bottom of the chain, or at the top of the chain, however you want to look at it.
Right, exactly. Well, so just kind of our kind of noodling on the future. Maybe that's a good place for us to wrap things up as we come to a close. Where do you see the industry going? We just kind of laid out some of it, but what do you see for the next decade of the space? What do you think is going to happen?
Oh goodness, I think it's going to be so different than what we see today. I mean, 10 years ago, you could count $1 billion RIAs or higher on one hand. There were only a few of them around at that time. And certainly that's not the case now. We've seen all these aggregators come into the space. So I think that we're going to continue to see that future consolidation. Whoever ultimately ends up with control of this industry, whether it's SEC or FINRA, I think they're going to want to see fewer firms. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to get harder and harder for some of the smaller practices or businesses and smaller advisors. So I think that's definitely going to impact things. Fortunately, every DOL kind of died out, but I think that would have made things accelerate at a faster pace. And I do think that there's a huge need for a solution for, obviously, our retiring population of advisors and business owners, in tandem with that lack of young talent that's coming into the industry. And we've kind of been talking amongst ourselves at Truelytics, and we're wondering if there might almost be a reverse independence movement. In other words, some of those older registered reps may consider selling to a wirehouse as a succession solution, which is a really, really, really interesting concept. Yeah. Or maybe broker dealers may start acquiring to solve for that as well.
It's interesting. That's a really smart line of thinking. I mean, if you look at parallels in other industries, right, it is not uncommon for when an industry goes through a rapid period of expansion, right, in terms of the number of businesses. And that's what we saw over the last, 25, 30 years. You just saw an increasing number of independent broker dealers, an increasing number of independent advisors. And then you started seeing an increasing number of RIAs, kind of exploding out there. But at a certain point in time, you start to see consolidation come back into play because people want to grow, they want to exit. Sometimes there's business challenges with being an independent, if prices are coming down or whatever. So you start to see kind of the roll up come back into favor. And it seems like, we're probably going to see more of that here in the near future.
It's definitely going to be interesting. It's going to be a time of change going forward.
Yeah, very cool. Well, hey, look, that was a great podcast. I really loved having you on this show. I love your thoughts and what I'm thinking is going to happen. Carla, I can just tell you this is going to happen. I have a vision. This is my prediction for the future. I think you and I are going to do many more of these shows together because, it was fun. We had a good time, man. Plus, we got lots of good stuff to share.
Definitely. Thank you. I sure hope so.
That's great. All right, great. Well, thank you again, Carla. We will get this published. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Carla or anybody else at Truelytics and like to see us cover in the future, if you have some practice management questions, please do hit us up at valuations@truelytics.com. Carla, where can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you individually?
It's pretty simple. Email address is Carla, CARLA, @truelytics.com. Can always reach me through our 800 number as well. That's extension 113.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much again, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.